Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Dirt and the Divine. This is where the podcast where we say what wants to be said. And today I'm so excited to have my friend and spiritual mentor and all around super amazing, cool person, Arjuna here with us today. And we're going to jam about some pretty cool, interesting things around Tantra and kundalini and spirituality and just like all around living a badass, big, bold life. Arjuna, hi. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. We've been I met you, was it in April of 2020, when I put out a request on Facebook and basically was like, okay, I'm ready for this now. Like I've been asking for the last couple of years, like to learn about kundalini and it just never came through. Like I was always like, I want to learn more about this ancient practice and I feel it in my bones that it's something that I need to know. But every time I asked, it kind of led nowhere. So it's like, what do they say? When the student is ready, the teacher appears. And it was around like April when I was like, okay, I'm ready. And then you like came into my life and I'm so grateful for it. So hi, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, that's the nature of the energy. That's how
Yeah,
it was for me too. I'm like, okay, what's next?
right.
Yeah, and she popped up.
And she popped up. I love it. So why don't we start this conversation with you just sharing with us like your story? Like, how did you get into all of this work, and share with us like your journey into um, this powerful work.
Yeah, so a little background about me. So I founded a school called Sacred Activation Institute, um, which was formerly Sacred Activation Yoga, where I was teaching a lot of yoga, and then it kind of developed as I've evolved and grown. It's also what we create has to also evolve and grow with us.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important just to recognize in business and in work and in relationships and for things that we have to show up for. So
Yeah.
my personal journey evolved into me sharing what I've learned, and then that evolved into me opening a school, and then the school kind of refining itself into what it is now, where um, it's really, I feel like I'm teaching just consciousness and how to work with consciousness.
Yeah.
And it's all based kind of on my experience and my own personal journey, and also how that has transformed over time by the different experiences that I've had and the different pilgrimages that I've taken and places that I've studied with and learned from. So it's kind of all become this, like when I try to share and teach, is really, I'm teaching now, I think, from a place of like, okay, where am I at and how can I reflect that back to others in a way that's going to allow them to um, move into a path or a lifestyle or become aware of choices they're making that's going to lead them towards what they desire. And so for me, I think it's yeah, my path has been long. I've been innately spiritual and connected since I was a child. Naturally, that was just something that I was imbibed with and kind of connected with. So for me, it feels really like it's a natural extension, I think, of like of who I am.
Yeah.
But I had to really kind of, to get to who I am, I had to go through a lot of who I was not.
Right. Yeah. You got to burn that shit away, right? You got to go through the fire of all of those layers
Yeah,
of
you have to
what's
go
not
through.
true.
And you have to keep, like, I feel like I keep awakening to new parts of myself, and then
Yeah.
I'm okay. Now the awakening is not the challenging point. It's like staying awake in
Yeah.
that part of yourself is where I'm like, so that's where I'm at least in my journey. I'm like, okay, how do I stay awake? Like,
Yeah.
how do I keep doing this? And so teaching is one of them, and still going on spiritual pilgrimages is another.
Mhm.
Um, but my journey really began in a place that was in a dark place. My journey began in a dark place. And it was a place that I was very unfamiliar with. I'd been I've been an athlete my entire life. And so I had kind of created an identity around this aspect of myself that was a very like action oriented, body oriented.
Mhm.
I always had the ability to really create from a young age. Whatever I wanted, I was able to envision it in my mind and really make it happen. So I had a lot of innate tools in me that were kind of fostered by my environment. I grew up on a ranch in New Mexico, kind of in the middle of nowhere, and was in between ranch life and city life all through my childhood. So I really kind of got this, now that I reflect back to it, I really was taken through rites of initiation as a child. I was taught things um, from a more indigenous perspective, but not so formally. Whereas it
Right.
was like, this is how you fit into the universe. Like, you're here, but nature exists all around you, and you're connected to these things, and you have to respect them, and you have to engage with them and honor them. And I learned how to hunt and how to fish. And so even within that, you recognize like, what is the value of life, and do we have the power to take something else's life? And if we are, then why are we doing that? And what is the purpose? And this is not that it was right or what it's wrong, or it may not even be what I believe now, but it was a construct of, it was a structure that I was given to understand in an informal way kind of what I was dealing with. And I recognize now that these informal, what I'll call rites of initiation or rites of passage, were really a, a very important part of my consciousness in being able to be where I am now. And so because of that upbringing, I think that maybe I didn't struggle with a lot of the things maybe other people struggled with.
Right.
Not that I don't have or haven't experienced it, but it shows up maybe differently
Yeah.
because I had this really amazing foundation that was given to me by
Yeah.
my ancestors, by my grandparents, by my parents, that were like, you are in the world.
Yeah.
And this is like, when you're a small little kid and you're seeing nature so vastly, you're
Yeah.
like, you feel like so tiny,
Right.
and so and then fast forward to now, that's my whole kind of like, this is the philosophy that I teach and move from, is this
Right.
microcosmic experience in the
In the
macrocosmic
macro.
experience.
Yeah, I love this so much. Like this is oh my goodness. Like yes, it's like you got the memo at a young age that we are part of this earth. Like I only got this memo just a couple years ago, and I was actually reflecting on this the other day about I was at a goddess retreat, and I it was in the middle of like winter. It was freezing, snow, all that kind of stuff, and we were told that we needed to bring like all of our snow gear, including snow pants and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, whatever. Like, I don't go outside in the cold in the winter. Like, what the? And even when I was there, I was like, well, I don't have snow pants, so I can't go outside. And she was like, you can borrow mine. And she like basically kicked me out. And it was the first experience that I had ever had. And I was 43, 42, of how profoundly powerful nature is, and how vast and like small I am compared to nature. So I can totally see that these are lessons that are gone. We don't, like how fortunate it was for you to have
It's
had
sad.
that
Like,
lineage.
when I hear that reflection, it makes me like emotional and sad, because I'm like, wow, people are really so disconnected.
Disconnected.
Because I'm coming from such a not that like, oh, I'm so connected, but I mean, I'm connected to nature. It's how I grew up. It's how I live. And I've had the contrast of being in a more metropolitan kind of experience where I can do it for a while, but then I feel that it's almost like a disparity that I
Yeah.
feel like, I'm like, oh my God, I need to get back into
Yeah.
nature, you know?
Yes.
But yes, we've disconnected from, and not that you can't find that in any experience. You can, because we are on the earth, but
Right.
allowing your awareness to kind of tune to it. So interestingly, kind of like just playing, like going off of what you just said, that experience. So I had a friend come from Miami recently to visit me in New Mexico, and he has property in Colorado. So he comes and I'm like, bring all your winter stuff. And he's like, I don't have winter stuff. I'm like, it's okay, I've got you. You know, I got extra stuff for you. You know what I
Right.
mean? So
Yeah.
so we pack up, and he's watching me pack the car. And I'm watching him watching me do this.
Right.
He's got his little backpack ready, and I'm like opening the fucking my closet, and I'm pulling out the big coats and the gloves and the hats and the scarves and the extra blankets, and
Right.
I've got extra water, toilet paper, stuff to make fire. I'm like, you know, I've got all this extra food. I'm like, if something, you know, because I was taught when you are raised like that, it's like, and you're going to the fucking tundra of
Right.
the United States, it's like,
Yeah.
you need to be prepared.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in his mind, he's like, this bitch is just like I might as well have thrown in the kitchen sink, you know what I mean? And like, what the fuck is he doing? So fast forward to us going to Colorado, and every time there was a, you know, I'm like, here, put this, you know, put this on. You're cold, wear this. You're this. And so
Yeah.
by the end, there's a moment where we're wearing everything that I had brought with us, and we've used all these things. And he's like, and I was like, listen, like, you've never been here in the winter. You can't show up unprepared.
Yeah.
It could be life or death.
Yeah.
Like, if you get snowed in some of the places that we were, like, you're not fucking getting out. You might be stuck in your car.
Right.
So how are you going to generate heat? How are you going to eat?
Right.
How are you going to stay warm enough to at least someone can come find you? You can get help, you
Yeah.
know, maybe the car breaks down.
Right.
So it's that kind of like this understanding of like, what are the possibilities that exist beyond what we may be used to. It
Mm-hmm.
may not always affect us, but it's like, you want to be prepared for it. And I mean, you've heard me
Yeah.
say this, it's like, you know, if you stay ready, you don't have to get
I
ready.
love
And
that.
the concept for me is really like, I'm like, I see it every day
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
my life. I'm like, you got to stay ready. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And so understanding that, it's like, yeah, nature is so much more powerful than us. We're never going to overpower it. Same
Never.
thing, we tying it back to Shakti, Kundalini, and Tantra. It's like, this energy is the entire universe. We're never going to overpower it. We are
No.
never going to control it. All
Yeah.
we can do is learn to live with it.
Allow it in and just be it,
That,
like go with it. Stop resisting it so much.
but
Yeah.
even in your experience right now, it
Yeah.
wasn't something like, oh, let me talk about it. It was let me go into my body and feel it, and,
Yeah.
and then see how it's going to move. And
Yeah.
that's really what it is that we're doing. It's like, okay, let me feel this energy. Okay, I felt it. Now what's going to be a way to navigate through it?
Right. And oh my gosh, this is such a big conversation, especially for right now, right? Because we're really in the moment in a massive, like, planetary, human, whatever you want to call it, shift, right? Energetic shift into much deeper consciousness than we've had for millennia. And now is the time for us to really start to feel these energies and embody these energies, because that is what we are. That's what all of this is, right? And so like letting go of that resistance around it and being like one with it just feels so much better. Like I feel so much better when I'm in that space. It's, and I love that phrase. What is it? If you don't have to get ready, if you stay ready.
If you stay
Right?
ready, you don't have to get ready.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love
And
that.
interesting is, I was just listening to a podcast by Rich Roll, and he had a Navy SEAL on there, and the Navy SEAL was talking about, and one of my students sent me this podcast, and I have this, like, I'm like, send me things that I need to listen to, and if it's not like, if you can give me the download, just download me so I can say, tell me information, we'll move on. But she sends me things, she's like, you need to listen to this. I'm like,
Right.
okay, because it's like sometimes a 2-3 hour podcast, totally worth
Right.
it.
Right.
But anyways, he has this Navy SEAL, and the Navy SEAL is talking about how in their environment there's this concept, or in many environments where there's like um, high performance environments.
Yeah.
There's this concept of optimal performance
Yeah.
versus peak performance.
Okay.
And so for this context, I'll give like a very vague definition, but that this is what we'll use, is understanding that peak performance is something that you're training for, a specific moment in time,
Okay.
and you're training for it. So they use the example of like the Olympics, like an
Right.
Olympic, they have that one sport at that one competition time, and everything they do gets piled in and is created around exactly moving to that pinnacle point of climax.
Yeah. Woo!
But then,
We love
yeah,
that. Sorry.
which is amazing, and it's
Yeah.
effective, and we need it sometimes,
Yeah.
especially in business, different things. It's like you
Yeah.
have that sales pitch, or you have that,
Yeah.
it's like you need to be ready for that.
Yeah.
But life is not that. Usually, if it is, that's, if you have that, that's great to know about that. But life is more about this other concept of optimal performance. And optimal performance is I'm ready to go whenever, like right now or right now. And
Right.
understanding where it's like, okay, I'm not going right now, so I'm going to rest, so that in case I have to go later, I'm going to have that energy. And
Yes.
being able to always, and within that, it becomes more kind of intricate in understanding like what a baseline is of
Yeah.
function at a minimum baseline, which
Yeah.
is like something I always talk about in my trainings, is
Yeah.
like you need to be functioning at a certain
Yeah.
baseline. And then once you are there, you move from that baseline, but you always return back to it.
Right. Yes. And if your baseline is you wake up in the morning and you're scrolling on, your phone, the first thing you're doing is scrolling on your phone, or the first thing you're doing is reading the news, or you know what I mean? Like you're not taking care of yourself in this more optimal way. I love that, right? Like I think that describes the work that I do too, is more of that optimization rather than the peak performance, right? Because yeah, like you want to maintain, I call it like a water level. When I'm working with my clients, it's like, you're starting at your baseline, which is here when you're coming into working, and same with you, with us who come into work with you. We've got our baseline of like, I didn't know proper breathing techniques and things like that when I first came into work with you, or even how to cultivate that energy through my breath. I knew about the energy and I had the energy and I was in it, but what you taught was how to like harness it and utilize it and raise that water level, raise that baseline, so that the first thing I do when I get up is some sort of breath work, is some sort of movement, is some sort of connection into nature or something like that. And then what that does is it sets the tone for the rest of the day. And when we're not doing that, right, we can either go this way for our day or that way for our day. But even if our day goes this way from whatever circumstances, our baseline stays here. Like we don't spin out with it, I think, is what you're
Yeah,
saying, right?
this is yeah, and you're taking something very, like, I kind of presented this very kind of abstract idea, and you're bringing it into a very practical approach to it. And that's what it is. It's like, how can you establish whatever your baseline is, and we all have a baseline. So
Yeah.
if you're, oh, I don't have a baseline, no, you do have a baseline. It may not be optimal for you, it may
Right.
not be where you want to be,
Yeah.
may not be what's going to allow you to continue to grow and move, but there exists a baseline. And so it's like, okay, first step one, identify what that baseline is.
Right.
And
Without
then
judgment.
two, yeah, no judgment, just
Yeah.
what is it, like objectively, okay, this is what it is. And then through these different teachings and practices and modalities that you may encounter on your spiritual path, you start to build into a new baseline, essentially, or kind of like, if the baseline, for point of reference, had like holes in it, you fill in the holes, get it really established, and then move from there. Because what happens, what I see a lot, and and this is kind of like we're pulling things now from different ideas, but
Yeah.
Staying ready in this space of optimization through your life has to be created from a strong foundation. And to build that foundation requires discipline and commitment and willingness and devotion, all these different things that are going to get you to show up for yourself every day. And so that is something that we have to really address first from my experience is like, okay, how do we get people to just show up for themselves? Like that's the number one thing. It's like, if can I show up for myself, whatever that may be, waking up at this time and taking a moment to, even if it's like, I'm going to wake up and my practice is not to get onto social media right away. I'm going to create a 1 minute gap between my awakening and the social media, and then maybe stretch it to 2 minutes and 5 minutes. And it's like, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to give my mind or my body or my fingers something to do to create that space? And that's where we're able to use these different types of practices that are just creating space within the consciousness to allow something different to happen.
Right, because we're in that habit of needing to do something. So what you're saying is, instead of doing the thing of picking up the phone, like that's an action, right? That's a habit. It's just like this ingrained thing that we've done, is just pick up the phone, push whatever the thing is and scroll it through. It's like when you're quitting smoking, right? For the cigarette. No, I was never a smoker, but I understand that sensation, right?
What do you do with that?
What do you do with that energy? Because it's energy at the end of the day. It's still that energy in that.
And
what you're saying is
template. If you look at it as like, I've been using this idea of templates. You've been running the same energy template. Yeah. So you have to re-guide the energy somewhere else. Eventually you may move out of an action role where it's like, but initially it's like, okay, let's shift the action into a healthier one.
Right.
Maybe, whatever, in quotations. Yeah. And then eventually we can learn to like redistribute maybe that energy or become more engaged with it. But initially it's just like teaching the body how to move the awareness into a different action. But this is something I'm in my own journey and in my own teaching, because my teaching is, when I'm sharing, I'm also sharing. It's also like I'm observing like a small like cohort of humans that represent a larger scale. Yes. And they come from different places and backgrounds and parts of the world and life journeys. And what I'm learning now is that going back to what I was talking about at the beginning of having these rites of passages, these initiations, these things that were maybe coming from a more indigenous kind of collective kind of communities versus the individualistic. So looking at that kind of concept as well, is that we're lacking that.
Oh yeah.
As a society, as a culture, but it's something that we're craving. Mm-hmm. Which is why a lot of us are seeking all of these ancient spiritual paths that have these put in place, but then we're trying to approach it with the Western mind of consuming and materialism and action oriented, which then like, for instance, for yoga, we'll use yoga as an example. When a lot of the way I was introduced to yoga was in a yoga environment, physical asana, movement, body. There needs to be a level of body awareness, a certain level of mastery. Well, I came from a background where I had that ingrained in me. I'm an athlete. I'm body aware. I know what's happening. I know how I move. I know my limitations, where I can't move. Because of repetition and self-observation. So then if we're moving into a place where most people are moving into these practices or modalities from, maybe if we're looking at, if the modality is A through Z, A being the beginning, Z being the ending, although there's never really an ending, right? And we jump in at L, or we jump in at O, well, we're missing all these other letters that are foundational principles that are designed to be built upon
Right.
themselves. And so even in my practice,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm looking at my students and I'm like, okay, I can teach you how to generate power and build it and do
Yeah.
all of these things. But what I've learned over time is I'm like, wait, we have to scale back all the way to
Hey.
A
Yeah.
and establish the consciousness from that perspective,
Yeah.
which then I look at the like yogic philosophy and the structure that it's been lined out, because it's pretty good at like, there's a format, there's a system, there's a way to move through this.
Right.
The ancients were amazing.
Yeah.
And we all have the same software and hardware. And so what I noticed, because I'm like, well, what if there's so many people doing yoga, if there's so many people doing all these spiritual practices, what is missing from these links? Because then I encounter them in my courses where
Yeah.
they're missing foundational principles of biological function as a human being,
Right.
but we're trying to engage in these higher faculties uh, of spirituality and
Right.
of higher faculties of mental rewiring and neural pathway connection and body mind assimilation. And
Yeah.
but we haven't really learned how to be present, how to be aware of our body, how to
Right.
become aware and separate what's happening in the mind versus what I'm looking at. And
Yeah.
if I'm looking at it, then I can't be it. So
Right.
these like basic, they're basic
Yeah.
they seem elementary, but what I'm learning and have learned and am still in process is how powerful they are.
They are. Yeah.
And that when they're established
Hmm.
initially,
Hmm.
how powerful the person becomes, because their baseline evolves with them, but also and their energetic bandwidth, it's all moving. In yoga we have the concept of the bindu,
Yeah.
the point that all creation expands and comes back from. So it's all growing at an exponential rate together, and then it contracts at an exponential rate, versus having like, which is a beautiful pattern, versus having like chaos and like disharmony, right? And that's really what we're trying to, that's what we all seek, is this harmonization.
We do. And, like we're simply just not taught it. And it comes back to the point of sharing your story. Like you were learning like the real life skills, the earth, how to be a human on this earth, on this planet skills. That's what you learned as a child. And it allowed you to be connected and have some of these baseline under this baseline understanding of what it means to be a human. And we as in humans lost it, completely lost it, over the last couple 100 years, right? And
I
it's
think
like,
we lost it more. I think it's been lost in maybe our Western civilization and
true,
experience.
true, true, true. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It still exists in other parts of the world. You're right. Hence
but
why
those
you want to
parts,
travel the world.
but those, yeah, hey, hey, parts of the world. But those parts of the world are even like they're using all of themselves to hold on to that as well.
Yes,
And they've
right.
been keeping it alive. And so they're, but being able to access it has even become challenging because for others, because it's like, where do you go to learn this information? Where do
Right. Yeah, because as it starts to, you remember Back to the Future? Did you ever see that movie?
Mhm.
Where there's one point, like the first one, where he's looking at a photograph of his family or whatever, and everybody's kind of fading from that photograph because I think he was stuck in the future or whatever it was. I don't remember now, but it's almost like that. It's like the stories and the history and the things that we need in order to remember that we are human, remember that we are part from this earth, and we return to this earth, and all of that, like that memory, just like it's fading even in these ancient cultures, because there's just like this crazy ass obsession with material. And like it makes me
Collective
so sad
consciousness
when I
has
hear,
a weight,
what's that?
the collective consciousness has a weight to it. So
Oh,
it's going to affect
Yeah.
all of collective consciousness, some,
Yeah.
at some capacity, and vice versa,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, you gotta and it's, I think once you recognize it, it really becomes easier to kind of like digest and understand, because you start to feel, like you said earlier, like you feel better.
Yeah.
It's just something that you
Yeah.
just feel better. There's no, you don't even have to explain it. It's like
No.
being out in the sun, you
Yeah.
just
You
feel
just
better,
feel amazing. Yes.
or you're taking deep breaths. It's like, wow, I just feel better. I'm thirsty, I have water, I feel better now. Or like,
Yeah.
and I think even just that small, like, and it's not small, or it is small, but it's super profound, of just
Yeah.
feeling better,
Yeah.
and letting that be like a guide in your life of like, oh, because we've also been taught to not feel good, like
Yeah.
that feeling good is not okay.
Yeah.
We see that in many different avenues and messaging through the world as we navigate, which has come from religion and society and government and our own, our own limitations and conditioning that we may have taken on or were programmed
Totally.
with.
I know, like one of the areas that I'm present to right now is a sense of guilt around the immense amount of joy and happiness I feel nowadays, you know? And
Well,
it's like, what? Wait, what?
because it's very triggering.
Yeah.
When you're living your best life,
Mm,
it and you're being observed
mm,
in that experience,
right.
for those that are observing who maybe are not, or there's a part of them that is not experiencing that, it's triggering,
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
becomes this reflection and this
Where they're not.
and even if you want to acknowledge it or not, it's happening where you're like, oh, there's something there that I desire, but I'm not making choices that are in alignment with that, and so I'm not achieving it. And so instead of allowing that person to be in that experience,
Hmm.
uh not that their idea, just because this other person is like having that, doesn't mean it's going to affect me, but it's affecting them. They're not allowing themselves to experience something, whatever that may be,
Yeah.
even though they may be seeing it reflected to them and they desire it.
Yeah.
And so that's really where I think, like, where all this work comes into. It's like, well, what is that? And why are you stopping yourself from
Right.
something that you desire?
Yes.
And that's a fine line too, because then there's addiction and all this other stuff where it's like, okay, you have to understand moderation and things, right? Because too much of anything too much sun will fucking can kill you.
Right.
Too much water can kill you. So it's like, then understanding moderation and balance.
Yeah. Right. So I want to actually ask you about what you just mentioned. Like, so in like, why do people stop themselves from feeling good? Why do people stop themselves from going into the space of, this feels really good for me, and I'm going to keep up my practices in the morning. I'm not, yes, this is challenging, not reaching for the phone and doing something else, or even if you've created that space and you're now taking it to the next level. Why do you think people stop or fall off the wagon, to use some other languaging around that?
Well, one, there's probably infinite amounts of reasons, because the ego is going to create infinite amount of reasons as to why, because it's also like, if you understand the mind, the ego is designed to survive and keep us alive. And so in its desire to keep us alive, it's like it thinks that it also has to maintain power and control, because that's how it's going to survive and keep us alive. So you have to kind of have a certain level of awareness with that the ego is important when it's functioning healthy, but if it's not, then it might not be. And then there's also another like touch of like, I was just in that same thing. They talk about narcissism. Like, you need a healthy level of narcissism to be able to even think that you can accomplish certain things and
Yeah.
desires. Unhealthy levels that then affect your life are not good. So it's that same, like, it's the concept of, and this is why I like talking about it in medicine, is it's like medicine can heal and medicine can kill. It can do both. It can be toxic, it could not. And depending on what environment it's introduced. And the same is true with all of spirituality and modalities and paths that we walk. But I think that the other thing that comes in is one, and this is like, we've all heard it, trauma, of course. Um,
Yeah.
and from trauma transforming it into post-traumatic growth is which how I try to really like look at that, like what power can I extract from that, and then use it to release myself from limiting beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
The self-inquiry process is the process that facilitates that.
Yeah.
um, then there becomes what our environment is, the people around us, who we are in their stories. And so that becomes an issue when we change. Some people don't allow us to change, but that's not an excuse. So you have to be aware of it and be able to navigate that. And then the other part is maybe laziness,
Mm.
just pure like lack of will. I
Right.
think that has an aspect of it.
Yeah.
And then I think are just the fear of the unknown, because we've created an identity that's associated with our personality. And when we start to change that, the ego is like, no, because part of that is dying. It's trying to keep it alive. It's like, this is who we are. And it's like, well, that's who I was. This part is transforming. And so you also have that feedback. And then some of it is quite literally biological, neuropathological, or
Ways.
neural pathways in the brain that need to be rewired and reconstructed, and neural pathway connections from the brain into the body that need to be rewired and understood,
Yeah.
um, and processed. So it's multifaceted, and we have to approach it in that way, because if we're not a one-dimensional thing, we're multi-dimensional. And because we've fixated our identity into one facet,
Yeah.
and but we have all these others. So then when you start allowing these others to an outside person, it could look like maybe you have DID, which is dissociative identity disorder,
Yeah.
or it can look like a type of mental illness to
Yeah.
people who are outside, who are functioning from one dimension of
Yeah.
themselves, instead of, not that it's right or wrong, but for me that was limiting, because I have multifacets that I want to explore and I want to express.
Yeah.
And it's through that expression of all of myself or selves that
Yeah.
I'm able to be me.
Yeah. I love this so much. It's so true. Because we've got those roles, right? And those identities that you talked about. And who am I without this thing? Who am I? Who am I without that? And this is part of the spiritual process, right? That we all go through, is part of that awakening is there is an unknown. You don't know who you are yet because you haven't fully stepped into that yet. It hasn't risen to your consciousness yet. You need to turn the volume down on that other ego identified part of you. Like I like to call it like your best friend, right? It's like, all amasses into one entity in a way, with multiple personalities or multiple facets, like you're talking about. It's on both sides. It's on the shadow and the light.
Yes, and that's
Right.
important. Yeah, and that's actually very important to recognize that multifacetedness exists in both
It
dim-
does.
dimensions of our
Mhm.
consciousness, and
Yeah.
so you have to be aware of
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
But
You need.
this is like, I mean, what we're talking about now it's elementary, I think, when you've been on the spiritual path for so long. But what I'm realizing is that the necessity to continue to practice to wherever you
Right.
are with
Yeah.
diligence, because it keeps reestablishing you in your foundation, and you become unwavering eventually in that. um, because when you don't, that's where you have this
Right.
instability. you know?
Yeah, I think with the word that came to me when you were saying that is grounding. It's very grounding to
Yeah.
remember the first half of the alphabet, right? Because at the end of the day, we are still humans. So part of this, part of what you teach in your programs as well is like the nutrition and the health element of it as well, right? Like nurturing our bodies in that kind of way too, because we are still humans experiencing this, even though we have the capacity to stretch that and have those like super floaty and infinite experiences. We are doing it in a human body, and so yes, we do need to continuously ground and remember human, sleep, eat, take care of your body.
Of the vessel, yeah. And like, you know, it's very basic, and everybody uses the metaphor and the example of like the car and the vehicle. It's like you fill up your car,
Yeah,
it runs out of gas, you don't go.
right,
You
right.
don't fill up your physical body with an energy, it doesn't go.
Yeah,
And then it starts, and then from there many other things start to break down in the system that then have to be addressed
yeah,
before you can start implementing other things again.
yeah,
Otherwise, now maybe you're putting gas, but the spark plugs went out, or the engine won't turn on, you know, it won't kick over
yeah,
to start the engine. So it's like, okay, well, gas no longer becomes important when you can't even turn the car on.
right.
So then you have to look at, you know, the body in a similar way as to like, okay, where is their imbalance? And we see this a lot because I study psychology. I'm finishing my degree and a bachelor's of science in psych. And I'm recognized more and more that these, because I've moved from a yogic kind of more traditional perspective, and not just yogic, but it may be I don't know, a more Eastern indigenous perspective of understanding wholeness and totality, and then moving into Western kind of medicine and treatment of different mental illnesses, and even things that become a mental illness that don't start there, like anxiety, like PTSD, like um, bipolar, all these kind of like personality disorders that come in. When we try to move into a place of, if we have an overworking mind, and then we're wanting to then maybe seek a cognitive behavioral therapist, not that it's not important and efficient, I'm not saying that by any means, but what I'm saying is that if the person is not, for instance, eating a balanced diet, and by balanced diet I mean giving their body the nutrients, the minerals, everything that it needs to function appropriately, then the effectiveness, and not that it won't be effective, but there, it will be more effective if that part of the system and body is supporting this other work at a cell, because it's a cellular thing that's happening. It's what's actually making the brain run. So for instance, somebody who has severe depression, sometimes that depression can be counterbalanced and addressed with proper B vitamins.
Yeah, and fish oil and oh my gosh.
Many things that can
Yeah.
be supplemented through nutrition that will
Like, yep,
establish them strong in their gut, which will
yep,
help their mind,
yep,
which will give them space to then be able to do whatever work needs to be done, either on the cognitive behavioral side or in the somatic side, or
yep,
both, which is
yep,
ideal from my
yep,
perspective.
yep. Somatic being body, like
Body,
body
somatic
movement
being,
stuff. Yep.
yeah, utilizing the body, because we understand through lots of research now that trauma and other
It's like bounce.
disharmonious things are in the body. This is where it's stored, and so it
Yeah.
has to be processed out. So supporting an entire process
Hmm.
to give you the best, and what you said earlier is like and I wanted to say is that you have to create the best environment for it to thrive in, and once that happens, then the natural progression of that is what probably that what you're seeking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it has, like, I mean, the rhetoric is body, mind, soul,
Mm-hmm.
and it's truth for a reason, right? Because you cannot just do that cognitive work, because whatever that trauma is stored in the body. And for the soul, for you to be able to hear the soul, the body needs to also be that open vessel, and the mind needs to be clear and cognizant as well, which is where that digestion and everything, like it's all one. You cannot pull these things apart.
It's all connected. And yeah, and our Western idea, even through medicine,
Or like disparate parts. You're like a kidney or a
it's like,
heart.
yeah, it's like separate parts
Yeah.
versus like this holistic
Holistic.
kind of
Yeah.
environment. And we see that, a lot of things, a lot of illnesses, a lot of diseases can be um brought into a space of healing and balance by changing environments, by bringing awareness to maybe parts of ourselves that are sleeping, that we're operating from. So we're operating from this sleeping part of ourselves, and it's creating us a lot of suffering. But once we awaken to that part of ourselves, then we can be like, oh, let me change this,
Yes.
or let me introduce something else, or put myself in a new environment, or whatever that may be. There are then avenues that can be taken to create change.
And if we don't take an active part in that, the universe just does it for us.
Right.
The
And
universe just like throw punches us and be like, "Do you got the memo yet?"
right. And if you just like, you don't see it, like, you don't even know that memos exist,
Yeah.
then you just like
Yeah.
backed up with all these
Yeah.
unread memos. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah. Right. At the end, you're like, "Oh my God, I have this pile of paperwork to go through. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Why didn't I just listen to this?"
Yeah, and you didn't know. And so
Yeah.
that also kind of goes to, it shows the importance of, one, teaching the children
Yes.
basic skills so that they're not acquiring
Yep.
so much, air quote, backups, you
Yeah.
know because it's not impossible, but it does become more challenging the older you become with the and eventually you become aware to it. But if you're backed up with all this unconscious, subconscious experiences that have yet to be processed, they're going to have to be processed
At some point.
at
Yep.
some point, or they won't be,
Or they
and
won't
that's
be.
okay too. There's also this other thing I was listening to. Maybe it was uh Sadhguru was saying, he's like, once you are 84 years old, just naturally the karmas of you unbind your karmic bound, your karmic, you being bounded karmically to earth after 84 years just kind of naturally comes undone. So it's like, and then and where they come from, these numbers, I'm sure they're rooted in something, but I'm always like, 84 years, okay,
Right.
so I can use that as a point of reference. But if you don't make it to 84 years, hopefully you've cleared enough out of yourself that you've done enough work, you know what I mean, in that time, to at least free yourself from the
Yeah.
karmic bound of
Yeah.
what it is to be human.
Yeah. Um, Amazing. I've loved this conversation. We could just keep talking all day long. But
Yeah, and I think that, and we can, and that's the thing, is that we can keep
yeah,
talking all day long about a lot of these concepts and these understandings. But as much as I do, that the most profound realizations come from probably not talking,
yep,
and really moving into the body, and moving into whatever excites you. I think the other thing too is that with spirituality, is that there is a lot of it that we participate in that we don't like. And I think it's necessary at some extent, but for longevity, you have to find things that you enjoy doing and that you're going to have fun with and that you're going to show up for every day. Because if you don't, then you're not going to do it. And so you want to do it because that's what's going to support you. So finding that also within what we're seeking is important.
I agree. I call that like playing like roulette, you know? It's like there's no shortage of avenues to take us to feeling bliss, right? There's no shortage of that. It's available everywhere. And we just need to find ours. And I think a lot of times people have resistance around that because they think linearly with it, you know? Like, oh, you want me to sit in meditation, but meditation sucks and I hate it. Da, da, da. And it's like, oh yeah, but no, like there's so many ways that you can meditate. Like you can just go for a walk in nature. You can do like there's so many very facets even to that. And it's finding the ones that, like you said, bring you that joy, because then you are going to get out of bed and be like, okay, I like this. I'm going to go do this thing now because I'm getting the rewards of what it feels like to be in that blissful state. And I want it, and I want it all the time.
And you have to set yourself up for success as
Yeah.
well. So create that environment. And that's the other aspect I think that is important, in especially when beginning paths of spirituality, is being able to be the kula. In Tantra, we have this aspect of the kula, and that's the group and the community. And so that group energy keeps keeps you moving and motivated when you're not. And so that's another really important aspect, until you've kind of developed that muscle, that spiritual muscle, and that spiritual discipline within yourself to be able to do that.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Which
Finding
goes back.
finding the community, which
Yeah,
now is online, and we have so
yeah,
much access to communities that maybe we didn't before, because
right.
everything's virtual. So something, accessing, like what we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
these maybe more Eastern, or that these less available practices that you had to travel and meet someone and know the right person and do all of that, are more accessible now.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. I mean, there's no way you and I would be here unless like you were online, and you weren't for a long time, and now you are. And I'm like, yay, I'm up here in Toronto, you're down there in the States. And it's like, oh, I couldn't have even come down to see you if I wanted to,
Right.
which I did, which I do. But like I want to be immersed in it in person, but at least we've had this, and I'm so grateful for it, because even through this medium, there's been an ability to deeply connect and feel the energy anyway, you know?
Yeah, and in yoga and in tantra, we have it's actually a fundamental kind of pillar of what we're working with. It's the transmission,
Yeah.
and so being able to transmit physically is always the best option. But
Yeah.
we exist within a quantum field,
Yeah.
and so we can also connect. It may take a little bit higher or more training, or just more dedication, probably devotion and willingness to do it, that allows us to do that. But yeah,
Oh
you
yeah.
can definitely do it,
Oh yeah.
and it's and we need it. And these tools, it's like, yeah, there's like one aspect, it's like it's all perfect and it's all happening the way it's supposed to be. And this is another example of that, this medium of like this maybe ancient, a lot of knowledge, a lot of what I'm teaching and sharing has been kept secret for thousands of years, and because of its potency and its
Yeah.
power.
Yeah.
But now that we need it in the world,
Oh my God.
it's
Yeah.
it's coming forward for
Yes.
those who are willing to receive it.
Yes, I agree. It's why human design has come to consciousness as well, right? Like that's a relatively new system using old ancient systems, pulling it all together. But that was just in the early 90s when that
Right.
got
And
written down.
yeah, and you see, and there's also a necessity. Swami Satyananda Saraswati, which is one of the main guys that I teach from, he wrote many books from the school of Bihar, founded the school of Bihar in India. And he talks about the necessity for even these spiritual practices to continue to evolve. Now, with that continuation and evolution of these practices, it does require from my perspective, it requires a level of understanding an existing structure deeply,
Right.
so that it can then be
Yeah.
presented and understood from a modern perspective, and take what's applicable. There are some things that are not applicable because we're just in a different time.
Yeah.
but there is the foundation of it that is.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. I think that just part of the reason why I understand human design at the level that I do is because I have an innate understanding of the systems that it pulls in.
And you have an innate understanding of yourself, I think,
Right.
which is the most critical part of being able to teach and move from any modality.
Yeah, that's true. No thanks, Al.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So you've shared so many nuggets of wisdom already in this. I'm just wondering if there was anything else on your heart or in that spirit wants to share through you in this particular conversation, just to wrap it up for now. And I would love to have you back.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to come back. I feel complete, actually.
That's
Um,
perfectly fine.
I feel really good. I feel like we had a really great conversation that is, depending on where you're standing and listening from, it's gonna maybe touch you in a place that will give you pleasure.
We're all pleasure.
That'd be another interesting topic to talk about. But yeah, no, I feel good. Thank you for having me, and thank you for facilitating this. And I'm really excited to see you and your journey as you keep integrating more tools, and just being able to watch you grow exponentially. I mean, even from where we encountered each other and to where we are now, it's nice to see that growth in others.
Yeah,
It
it is.
inspires me to continue sharing. So
Yeah.
thank
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that acknowledgement and for stating that. And yeah, I think that there's so many nuggets in here that people can just pull one and go, okay, maybe I should just start with this thing. And
Yeah,
then they can
and that's it. Simplicity. That's what you want to stay simple, keep it easy.
yeah,
And
get out of that all or nothing black and white trap. That this is the biggest like mind fuck and sabotage there is out there. It's like, I gotta do all the things. No, that's like the biggest sabotage out there.
do one thing and do it really, really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, start there. And then
Amazing.
if anybody's interested in connecting with me further, they can find me on Instagram at arjunara.life, and then Sacred Activation Institute as well on IG, and Facebook, Arjuna Ra. And I have some upcoming programs. Right now we're in a life empowerment program, which is a 3-month intensive daily, 3 days a week we're practicing morning and evening. And then in the next couple months, I'll be launching another life level 1 awakening program.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I've done level 1 and level 2.
hopefully we'll get level 3 happening soon, as soon as we can have people
In person.
congregate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, sign me up. Amazing. Thank you so much, my friend. Keep just like keep sharing this knowledge and keep sharing this wisdom. It is rippling out there. And I've been part of these kulas now like for since April of last year, and just watching everybody in those groupings just have their own experiences and their own expansion and their own journeys. It's just like, yes, we need more of this. Like I call it, like, people are popcorning, popcorn.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting.
Amazing.
And like popcorn, you have to have applied heat and pressure.
Yeah. I never even
And
thought about that. But yes. And not a
yeah,
microwave.
and not a microwave. I mean, man, you can microwave it, but it's not as good as old
No,
school.
no. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you to you as well, dear listener and watcher of The Dirt and the Divine. I trust that you enjoyed this episode here. And if you have any questions or you want to continue the dialogue with Arjuna or with myself, please don't hesitate to reach out. All of his contact details will be in the show notes to make it easy to stay connected to this wonderful, magnificent human being. Thank you, Arjuna, for being here. I appreciate it so much. I trust that you really enjoyed this episode, and I wanted to share with you that what we were talking about in terms of, connecting that mind, body, and soul together is a large part of the work that I do with my clients as well, because that was what transformed it for me. I had a lot of these patterns and this negative thinking and depression and anxiety and a lot of these body sensations from trauma that I experienced as a child. And when I did all of the therapy, I did a lot of the mindset work, and I was only getting so far with it. I kept finding myself snapping back into really old patterns and habits. And I was like, what the, come on. And it was when I started to really go into the embodiment stage of things, the somatic that we talked about, which is the body, because our unconscious, our subconscious, our trauma, everything lives in our body. Our soul lives in our body. Our answers live in our body. Our intuition on that side of things, and the trauma and the stories and the patterns also live in our bodies as well. So we can scrub our minds up as much as we possibly can, right? Which is through my mind unfucker process. But we also need to call in Aphrodite. This is what I call calling Aphrodite, right? Where you are now bringing in the body element, right, to your personal development journey. And this includes waking up from here down, which then just is a spark plug and a catalyst into your growth and expansion into who you truly, truly are. And ultimately, it brings you to a place of peace. First, just calm. And then you kind of roll your way up into acceptance and self-liking, and then self-loving and passion and expression, because you know who you are, you know what your truth is, and you're not afraid to say it. That sensuality and that sexuality where you feel the energy that Arjuna and I talked about on this podcast. You feel that energy of the vibration of the universe, and it becomes completely and totally embodied in who you are. And once you are able to connect all of those dots, and it opens up your intuitive powers huge, and then you hear what is right for you, what is next for you. You make better decisions. You're calmer, you're more focused, you're more determined. You achieve more, and you're much more disciplined, because you're making allowances for the flow, and you're making allowances for the expression of your truth to come out in the most truthful way for you. And all of that accumulates into a sense of pure joy, happiness, and inner peace. It's not a bumper sticker. It's not a slogan. It's truth, right? You can go from feeling that inner turmoil and those patterns and that dissonance within you, what I call the integrity breach, and that sensation and feeling of resistance, or any of those things that we talked about in terms of what's stopping you from being able to stick with the healthier habits and stick with the more positive ways of flowing in this lifetime, and not having to wait until you're, what did he say, 84 years old. All of this is available for you right now. And this is what I have on offer for you in my coaching programs, whether that is in my group coaching, which is Feminine Rising, whether you're a man and you want to come and work with me in the dark side of the man, where we help you own this part of yourself, or if you are working with me privately one-on-one as a woman as well in your dark goddess, right? So whichever way you decide to come in, or even just through my free 5-day receiving challenge, even just following me on Facebook or Instagram would be a fantastic way for you to dip your toe or dive all the way in wherever you are on this journey, in order to achieve that state that you already are. You all already are this. It's just a matter of shedding and burning away all the shit that's not you, so that the true you can shine. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.